Oh, welcome back to the Wild Hunt. The only difference from the last part was that I've watched the opening for All Summer Ranking, the second one, 10 more times. Let's get into it. Part 1 of Tamao-Route, yay! It was an afternoon so peaceful, it made you want to sleep. Over 2 weeks had passed since Mitri Kabutoyama's departure from the academy. The daily grind made the momentary ripple of the sudden change fade. Even the most vivid memories faded over time, so it was no wonder that the students had started to move past it already. I stood in front of a luxurious sofa. It had a natural leathery smell and an ergonomic design that made the sitter believe they'd been embraced by feathery wings. I proudly sat down on it.
良い作りだ。重みに応じて適度に沈み込むクッションの具合、広々とした座席部分の作りといい、ふわりと立ち上る天下な香りといい。
I was in Okushima, the defenseless town built around a train station instead of my well-guarded school. Several multi-purpose buildings stood along the river, and various stores sat next to the main road. Hold on, it hurts to read like this. The entrance to the arcade had been covered by the text that said, the town of anime, Higashiko, like a witch's chant praying for the success of the local subculture. The sofa had been placed in front of the arcade entrance, easily, effectively covering it. Since it was time for lunch, the arcade had a few people walking by. Some passed by right next to me, but for some reason, not a single one looked my way.
よろしく頼むとしよう。
Someone walked up from behind me, then lowered their head.
かしこまりました。
What the fuck is happening? It was Tamao. She seemed so unused to speaking politely that she sounded nervous. What is happening? I guess they won't show me the actual title of these until, I actually go there. I like how the expression changes from when she's there to when you actually select her. It's same for the others, seemingly. Except for his. His doesn't change at all. And an unintentional act, no doubt, but I found it charming nonetheless. Encoding overloaded? What the fuck? Is it because I have Steam open? Whoops. Shouldn't have. Bashfulness was an excellent spice.
ではまず肩から。
As ordered, she prepared to start the massage, but I raised my hand to stop her.
肩ではなく二の腕を頼もう。
二の腕か、いや、二の腕ですか。
She awkwardly reached for my upper arm.
それでは力が足りないな。こう挟み込むようにしなければ。
挟むって、でも手で挟んでも。
太ももがあるではないか。
Her innocent reaction reminded me of a child holding a sword for the first time. It spurred on her urges within me that I knew I had to ignore. Luckily, I was a man who excelled at self-denial. This was merely a massage, a ritual meant to relieve fatigue from the daily grind.
さあ、何をしている？自ら口にした約束を違えるとは、クラウンの名とはそれほど軽いものなのかね。
はい、かしこまりました。
Did she lose? Did it try to fight again and she lost? She opened her thighs and welcomed the man's upper arm into her nether regions. The maiden's face flushed with embarrassment. She put down on her lip to bear this ordeal. The usually rough Tamao looked like a young bird, and I found the sight extremely enticing. It felt like a thorn had pierced into my chest. Sudden darkness. Felt like someone had turned off all the lights on the stage. The warmth dissipated as well. Felt like I had suddenly been transported to a pole. The crowd, almost breathing, everything disappeared in the blink of an eye. Only a wraith who cursed my very being remained.
消え失せろ哀れな影よもはやお前は残響だ千の恨みと万の憎悪を抱いて地獄で待て
I cut him off with my words.
私がそこへ行く日を
I opened my eyes and caught sight of the familiar clean ceiling. I didn't see any clocks from the bed, but a clock told me that it was about 2:30 in the morning, which seemed correct. Okay, so it was just a dream. It was the dead of night, an ominous time when the divine and abnormal were dormant.
夢か
I was glad that our rooms had our own showers and bathrooms. I vomited until my stomach was empty. The unpleasant feeling in my chest only went away when nothing but the gastric juice flowed out. I washed my mouth and looked at the mirror before me. Usual Shinri Narita stared right straight back. Using the secret breathing technique of Gib, I stabilized my mind and body. The black oil-like remnants of the dream that clung to my head soon vanished. Oops. Takeshi Hanazono had been my first target. The weight of a person's life remained the same regardless of whether they were a sinner spreading pain or a saint loved by all. Felt very light, light enough to scatter like paper in the breeze. Humans could kill their own without any problems. Humanity survived by killing, relying on, and taking from their kind without hesitation. There was no hesitation left in me. Shinri Narita was merely a hateful, murderous avenger. He planned to accomplish his goals no matter what disaster his actions caused. I had 3 targets left. The traitors who killed my sister, father, and mother deserved the hammer of rage and justice I planned to use.
ちょうど良い時刻だ
Looked outside the window at the sleeping academy that was covered by a veil of darkness. Everyone was sleeping and the silence was palpable. After focusing my mind on the hallway, neighboring rooms, and general surroundings, I confirmed that no one was moving and prepared to act. I was clad in all black with my face under a mask.
途中までは愉快な夢だったこう玉緒の太ももが実に心地よく
Looking back on that memory wiped the last piece of the nightmare from my
戻っ
mind.
たら朝まで続きを再生するとしよう
Muttering that, I secretly vanished into the academy's grounds. Kurofune Mikuro was not a simple target. I realized his path to make him feel despair was to unveil the secret of this castle, the academy. So I'd been trying to look for a way to do that since enrolling, however that hadn't proved easy. Over a month had passed, but none of the issues I'd found had led anywhere. None of the clues I'd found led anywhere. I hadn't discovered a single decisive fact. What was going on in the academy's depths? The most obvious suspect was that building, the crystalline concrete structure that peeked out of the forest like a spear. The plant was apparently a top secret research facility that was off limits to not only students, but most standard researchers as well. I hadn't tried to get into that tower yet. The reason was simple. It was too well guarded. Its thorough defenses, which were active 24 hours a day, made it impenetrable even to ants. Not even I could have gotten in without proper preparations. But as the saying went, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If I wished to obtain the Academy's secrets, I had to go there sooner or later. Around point of light slipped past the wall. After waiting for the guards, holding a flashlight to pass, I melted into the shadows and began to move. Cloaked by the darkness, I jumped through the area and approached the secretive dark
まず
forest.
は行く。今夜は手始め、相手の手の内と出方のほどを我が身をもって推し量るとしよう。
Hishak would have called my actions reckless, but sadly my loyal maid wasn't by my side. I also had some suspicions, particularly about Mitri Kaputuyama's voluntary leave. Was that a precursor or something? Also, there was no telling how long I could hide my true identity from Kurofune Mikado. Knew he would figure it out sooner or later. Couldn't waste too much time at the academy on mere mischief. I had to act fast. The academy had an insane amount of security devices in it. Cameras, alarms, sentry guns. Had to make it past them all as I rushed through the garden. I felt so light that I thought I'd grown wings. Thanks to my yoga training, I could have controlled the depths of my sleep and made 2 hours of sleep have the same effect as 8, but that wasn't all. I had a good dream as well. Seeing the rough Tamo act so modest felt fulfilling. Decided to put me in a good mood. However, that made me realize that I cared more about Tamo Akahito than I thought. Her challenging eyes, her fiery nature, her gentle, considerate attitude that was unfortunately hidden by her roughness. At first, I thought she was a lone wolf, but I soon realized that she proudly protected her pack.
せんない話だ。初夏のやけに酔ってしまった。復讐者が今さら人並みの行為を抱こうなど、おこがましいにも程がある。
Closed in on the entrance to the forest, looking up I saw full moon shining down on me. This really was a good night. It was time to finally enter the secret area. The forest was strange. From the outside, it looked like a simple ginkgo forest, but when you entered, it instantly turned into something far more complex and varied. Tenko Academy must have been built in an area that used to be a large forest. The forest to its north was surely once a part of that. A road linked the research building and the plant, but it was better protected than anywhere else. Making it past it seemed nearly impossible. Thus, I decided to approach the plant by breaking through the deep, dark forest. Had security as well, but a lot less of it than the main entrance. Or at least that's what I thought, until just a few minutes later. Even though I hadn't been in the forest long, my sense of direction had failed.
これは何とも危うい。この闇の深さといい、濃さといい、まるでシベリアの奥地か、シュバルツシルトの魔女の森ではないかね。
There were forests in Europe that some people claimed were sealed by the curses of real witches. This one here felt just as ominous as any of
な
those.
るほどな。あの建物を囲む森にセキュリティが手薄なのは、油断ではなく必要がないからか。
The forest clearly had a history to
恐
it.
るべき天然の妖怪だ。ごく浅い森だというのに、普通のものなら、ものの数分で迷路に落ちて、生涯出口を探してさまよいかねん。
However, I had a sense of direction akin to that of a bird of passage. This impenetrable forest did nothing to hinder me.
あちらか。
Following the strand of moonlight leaking through the trees, I pictured the location of the tower beyond the deep darkness and took a step toward it. After a while in this verdant labyrinth, I stopped, for I saw something right ahead of me. Held my breath and quickly hid between the trees. Several tens of meters ahead, within darkness too deep for any normal piece to see through, 2 silhouettes peeked in and out like dogs chasing each other's tails. It was a murderous dance that left no room for either of them to catch their breaths. They moved from tree to tree, branch to branch, at inhuman speeds. Without stopping even once, the 2 shadows aimed for a chance to bite into each other's necks. The faint smell of blood reached my nostrils. One of them had gotten hurt and was on the verge of defeat. Suddenly, the scales of the fight shifted. The once equal fight turned more and more one-sided. That thing they fought at the start, an out-of-control thing that Mitori shot with her spears. That's an HMI, isn't it? Like, they're saying, like, oh, they're trying to make, like, a paradise for HMIs, but they're actually trying to turn them into weapons or something, I feel. Like, basically, they're trying to do some weird experimentation to make them into, like, a new breed of like, superhuman. But the failed ones just turn into these monstrosities that they then potentially, like, sell as weapons or something. One of the disadvantaged gave up on fighting and retreated towards my direction. Fully realized it was that silhouette from some time ago. I met this creature on my first day while secretly exploring the grounds at night. Told it had inhuman jumping abilities. However, it was wounded, so its movements were now sluggish. That was Tamo's voice, wasn't it? I saw pale skin and underwear peeking out from under the clothes. At that point I noticed something was following her. Didn't see what it was, but it seemed to almost melt into the forest's darkness. Saw proof of its existence where the sound it made as it kicked off the trees. Couldn't perceive that foe. However, I knew anything capable of hunting that silhouette was clearly inhuman. Thus, I had to. I shall leap out and strike. Dangerous. Sure. I jumped out of the shadows of the oak growth. As I jumped out of the shadows of the old growth, I felt bloodlust targeting me. Then, I heard the sound of something rending the profound darkness in the air around me. It seemed the invisible enemy had noticed me the moment I made a move. It had launched an attack on my life right away. Didn't even know what I was. But its decision to eliminate me didn't have a hint of hesitation. A clear statement that anyone who dared to enter the forest would meet their end. The mechanical nature of its mentality gave me chills, almost making me freeze in place. What's this invisible terror? Didn't even have time to think about it. As I lowered my stance and accelerated forward, a sharp flash cut through the silky threads of moonlight. Narrow, or rather a crossbow bolt. It had the power to puncture metal, and also exceedingly silent. In a situation like this, where the darkness hid everything else, it made for a better weapon than a gun. I could see fairly well in the dark, but watching out for crossbow bolts still seemed difficult. I knew I couldn't fight for long. Fearing that I'd end this quick, I jumped from tree to tree to avoid the bolts and approached the enemy. I felt searing pain in my side. Second bolt sunk directly into my flesh. It was a fatal wound. I failed. Precise aim and speed were otherworldly. They must have had night vision equipment. That was the only possible explanation in my mind. Burning pain in my side made my vision blur. Letting down a scream, I forced my shaking legs forward and approached the shapeless foe. Couldn't parry it before I did what I had to do. I had to keep moving. It was the enemy. I used my failing vision to chase my foe and turn the tides. And he's dead. The third shot struck me. The bolt pierced right between my brows. The metal head punctured my skull and tore my brainstem. This was my reward, the price I paid for being too impulsive. The pain had dissipated. I knew my life had come to an end. Feeling strangely emancipated, I fell into the eternal darkness. End. You know, I should have probably expected that. But hey, I'm nothing if not retarded. I played safe and not leap out, even if I could see in the dark quite well. Following something that jumped from tree to tree like a puma seemed difficult. Hiding helped me hear the quiet sound of springs and gears. It was coming. Something cut through the air, and as I'd expected, headed straight towards the person in black. Moonlight revealed that it was an arrow, now a crossbow bolt. I jumped out and quickly struck down a high-speed bolt that almost hit the shadowy person's head.
力に頼りすぎだと言わなかったかね。
Shadowy figure stood in place as though struck by lightning.
立ち止まるな。急いでこの場を離れろ。
The darkness made it extremely difficult to strike down the small bolts. I'd only really gotten lucky with the first one, so I didn't expect a second miracle. However, the person in black didn't move. When I looked over to see what she was doing, I saw her collapse like a marionette with strings cut. Ran up to her before she hit the ground, grabbed her, and jumped away. A second later, I heard bolts pierce the darkness as they approached us. It all seemed to happen in slow motion. The bolt bit into my back, but I ignored the pain and carried the collapsed individual away.
魔窟を守るは恐るべき竜か。今夜のところは一時の敗北を受け入れるとしよう。
Sensing enemies in my back, I rushed out of the forest with my new companion. This disorienting forest ended up being my ally. Even my mysterious enemies weren't immune to its effects. It lost us somewhere along the way. Coding overload is starting to piss me off. Oh yeah. I secretly took the shadowy figure to my own room. She remained unconscious. Blood flowed from the wound in my back. The pain had made me realize how soft I'd been. Wouldn't I have defeated the mysterious crossbowman if I ignored her plight? You know, it wasn't the optimal decision. It had focused on saving her.
ともかく手当てをしよう。
I ignored my own wound. Ignoring my own wound, I carried the dark figure to my bed. This might be mild spoilers, but all this reminds me right now is Grimgar of something in Ash. Where as they're trying to run away, one of the characters got hit in the fucking back by a bolt, and instead of like telling the others, he basically like focused on getting them to safety and then fucking died because of blood loss. Because he was hit in the back with a crossbow bolt. Then I took the form-fitting leather suit and took off the form-fitting leather suit and removed her mask. It was Tamao-Route. I expected as much since the earlier event in the forest. The wounds had exposed her underwear, which made it clear that I'd been dealing with a woman. And by that point, I could recognize her figure and movements anywhere. The encounter Tamao seemed defenseless, though in a different way from usual, as she faintly breathed through her pale lips.
君が何者で何のつもりであの森に踏み込んだのか詮索するのは後回しだな。
I turned on the lights and started treating her. However, before I could even think of the wounds riddling her body, I realized something else. She was truly beautiful, a body pristine out of work of art. Though she lacked the miracle of beauty and joy that was the voluptuous chest, her toned frame more than made up for it. Her skin felt far softer than in my dreams. The guardian of the forest was quite a heretic for hurting something so beautiful.
それにしても、この程度の装備や用意であの塔に近づくとは、随分と無茶をするものだね。その
Most of the wounds were made by blades, though some were clearly the results of passing bolts. She was bleeding all over, staining her white underwear and skin. The deepest one was a bolt wound on her left leg. It was far worse than the others. The fact that she'd managed to move despite it left me at a loss for words. From what I could tell, they preemptively took out her leg to make her more susceptible to future attacks. Tamao-Route was a true crown, someone who fully deserved the title, but the crossbowman was just as inhuman. Encoding overload keeps fucking showing up. What the fuck's going on? No idea. Not showing me anything. The fuck? Where's the Steam client web helper going? Hold on. What's the fucking friends list? I was going insane because I had the friends list open. Fucking excuse me? Shallow wounds all over Tomo were proof of that. Amateurs often attempted to end battles in a single hit, but delivering gradual harm was a more surefire path to victory. The opponent noticed Tomo's strength, so instead of aiming for a one-hit kill, they switched to weakening her first, like a hunter dealing with a raging beast. None of them seemed deep enough to impair her life, but I couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't leave a mark.
この部屋では専門的な治療とまではいかないが、できる限りの処置はしておこう。
After I finished treating Tamo, I focused on healing myself, taking him up and back so I couldn't stitch it, so I just bandaged it tight. Didn't drop my guard, but thankfully no one had followed us. It looked like I'd been worried for nothing. I looked behind me and saw Tamo stir. Walking to my bed, I welcomed the princess to reality.
どうかね、タマオ。体は動くだろうか。
痛て、いろんなところがズキズキ。
She rubbed her eyes and checked her body.
包帯？なんで？
手当てをしておいたが、傷は決して軽くない。朝まではここで休んでいた方がいいだろ
う。そっか。成田が手当て。
Tomo's eyes suddenly widened after she finished looking over her wounds.
俺の体！
うん。応急だが手当てをしておいた。
それはどうも。じゃなくて、寝てる間に。
The expression on her face made it seem like the world was ending. She looked at her body and me over and over, breathing heavily through her nose.
負傷しているのに性的に高ぶったのかね。いや、顔が赤い、言動もおかしい、血中酸素も不足しているようだ。まさか頭を打って脳に支障が出たのでは。
脳に支障あるのはお前だ。俺が寝てるのをいいことに脱がして、乙女の肌を。
Despite being wounded, she jumped out of the bed and grabbed me.
脱がせた。じっくりと見た。たっぷりと触った。そして手当てをした。
お前！
服を脱がさずに手当てをする方法があるのなら、高額のためにぜひとも教えてもらいたいものだが。
そういう話をしてるんじゃなくてだな。
Grinding her teeth, she looked at me with tear-filled eyes.
とても綺麗だった。
あ？
美しいものを隠す必要などないと私は思う。胸を張って満天下にさらして何を恥じることがあるのだろう。いや、張るほどもなくささやかだが、傲慢を信仰する私の魂にも訴えるほど、玉緒の裸が美しかったのは事実だ。
Censorship.
俺の胸はそこまで小さくね。
Yeah, exactly.
怪我された。
One moment she was screaming, the next she was crying. Her expression changed like the sights on a kaleidoscope, and I knew I would never tire
こ
of
れが
it.
いわゆる乙女ハートにスカイフォールというやつだろうか。
うるせえ！黙ってろ、この痴漢野郎！もうこうなったらてめえをもう二度と喋れない体にするしか。
ところで玉緒、つかぬことを尋ねるが、服はともかくマスクを脱がしたのは構わなかったのかね。
She reached to grab me, shaking and red-eyed, but my words made her
お
freeze.
前どうしてマスク？俺。
She belatedly realized the situation. Her face grew pale and her voice shifted to a monotone.
マスクは外した。うん。念のために言っておくと、夜歩きで玉緒と会うのは2度目だ。転校初日の夜にも会ったな。黒ずくめの君を。
俺の正体を見た。
The tension was so thick that I felt the illusory blade at my neck. It was hard to believe that it was the same maiden who just made a scene over her body. She seemed like a machine, a clockwork construct with no room for emotion or thought. If necessary, Tamao Akahito would follow any orders. But now she must have been thinking of how to deal with Shinri Narita. How to hide her goals and true identity, as well as how to silence me. She had the ability to turn my room into a scene of a bloody strife in an instant. So I had to pick my words carefully, as though I was dealing with nitroglycerin.
最初に出会った夜、私と軽くやり合った時、 あの時の身のこなしで玉を疑っていた。
According to Miss Tokino's curriculum, HMIs with halos that enhanced physical abilities were relatively common, but most had low-grade enhancements. Even halos were limited to the laws of physics. Most physical enhancement halos couldn't enhance people beyond the limits of their body. It was a matter of cause and effect. Even if you had the power to destroy a skyscraper, your body and bones couldn't bear it. So in order to raise your physical prowess beyond that limit, you had to either increase your overall potential or shatter the rules themselves. And HMIs who could do that, something like that, could be counted on one hand, even in the academy. With two of those being Tamao and Saku.
ところで玉尾、どうしてあの森に？
それはお前の方だろ、成田真理。こんな夜更けに黒ずくめで立ち入り禁止の森に忍び込むなんて。
では理由は聞かないでおこう。
Unexpected response seemed to calm Tamao
追
down.
及の代わりに警告させてもらおう。このスクールは危険な場所だ。おそらく玉尾が知っている以上に深入りすれば命はない。探るのはやめておくことだ。
そういうわけにいくかバカ。
I was actually surprised. The emotion and instant response was far too clear. In that moment, she felt more like a passionate flame than a sharp razor. She restored her cold mask. It was an empty expression you wouldn't have expected from her usual rough self, from the straightforward girl I'd seen mere moments ago. Why had she approached the forest? Was it because Mithra had vanished? No, that made no sense. She'd been investigating the academy before that happened. This was some sort of plan. That didn't fit her personality at all, so it seemed fair to assume she's working for someone. Yet, just a second ago, she'd momentarily shed her murderous demeanor and shown a glimpse of emotion befitting a maiden her age. The intensity contained within made it clear that Tamao Akahito had an unwavering will. Made it clear that she would never stop, no matter what I said or did.
わかった。私はもう何も言わない。どうかしたのかね？面白い顔をして。
She sat on my bed and looked at me like I was a peculiar beast. She even stopped caring about the fact that she was exposing herself to me.
成田、お前おかしいぞ。頭のネジが緩んでるのか？
ずいぶんな言われようだな。私は愚かなほどにありきたりの人間だと思う。
最初から妙だった。前にも言ったな。俺はそういうのに鼻が利くんだよ。育ちのせいで。何やら嗅ぎ回ってるかと思えば、下り顔で警告して、スクールから手を引けとか言い出しやがる。
赤人玉緒は言って聞かせれば止まる程度の女なのか？
なんだって？
君はとっくに決めている。言って果たすのだと。それがどうしてなのかまではわからないがね。千の言葉も万の敵も今さら玉緒に道を違えさせることはできないだろう。私は揺るがぬと心を定めたものを引き止めるような無駄で無粋な真似をしようとは思わないだけだ。
わけのわかんないこと言うなよな。毒気抜かれちまうよ。
誇りたまえ。己の命さえかけて良しとする道に出会えることなど一生に一度あるかないかだ。出会えたことが必ずしも幸福に結びつくとは限らないが、自分で気づいていようがいまいが、玉緒が決めてしまったならば私にできることはもはや一つしかない。これだけは覚えていてほしい。私は一人の学友として君の身を案じ、君が危険に踏み込まないことを願っている。
バカ、何言ってやがんだ。誰が学友だ。
Tamo's face reddened like a lit match.
私の片思いか。それは寂しいことだね。
Regardless, he spoke nothing but the truth. Instead of praying that she found joy on her path, but I realized that a hateful avenger had no business wishing for anyone's bliss.
片思いとかって、お前。
She wanted to say something, but instead shook her head to rid herself of the thought. Then her expression turned grave.
成田、そんなことよりも、お前、本当は何を企んでスクールに来たんだよ。
I couldn't bring myself to answer that question. Their goal was revenge. Tamao found out.
いいか。
いいのかね。
Tamao proudly backed away, as if to make us even for me not pressing any further.
成田は変なやつだし、腹も立つし、この玉のお肌を見られた以上、最後には始末しなきゃならないけど、悪いやつじゃないみたいだから。
Not a bad guy. Strange. Felt like she was talking about someone not present.
メガネ違いというものだよ。私は救いようのない悪人だ。玉緒の勘違いはさておくとして、重要な問題がある。我々はお互いの秘密を知ってしまったわけだが。
お互い様。知らぬ存ぜぬってことにしようぜ。
Those words were also warning. Play along or else.
その条件が成立するのは、互いの失うものが等価である場合だけだ。私たちの場合、互いに正体を明かせば、どちらの失うものが多いだろうね。
へえ。はっきり言えよ。持って回った言い方は好きじゃない。
単刀直入は望むところだ。今回の件に関し、私は取引を申し出る。玉緒の秘密を誰にも話さないことと引き換えに。
取引じゃなくて、脅しの間違いじゃねえの？
解釈は好きにしたまえ。
ま、お前とやり合うのは厄介だ。取引で黙ってるっていうのならいいぜ。何でもくれてやるよ。
She's gonna fucking
大
save
したも
her.
のは持っちゃいないけどな。
何でもいいのか。では、
Yep.
玉緒をもらおう。
なるほど。玉緒が欲しいか。それならすぐ用意できるし。って、
Unexpected knockout punch shattered her composure. Her expression changed at a rate hard to keep up with. After taking a while to think, she opened her eyes wide and shook her head as if she didn't believe what I was saying. Then she rolled out of the bed and dragged herself back to the window with inhuman speed. There was a race where competitors had to sit. She'd no doubt
何で
win.
もくれてやると聞いたように思うのだが。
もちろんくれて。いや、やらない。無理無理無理。
She made a cross with her hands and shook her head. Amusing. I didn't expect Tamao to be such a comedian.
では仕方ない。玉緒の素性をエルに教えてこよう。
待てマジ待て。かなり待て。誰かに話したりしたらただじゃおかねえからな。
ただじゃおかないというと。
半殺し。いや、7割殺しだ。マジボコボコだぞ。
She actually stood up and started shadow boxing.
目の保養になる。
This is just not the situation for her. Tamao jumped back into my bed and hid under the sheets. The cool face she'd shown a few moments ago was nowhere to be found. Amusing. I hadn't felt so jovial in quite some time.
ともかく7割殺しとは恐ろしい。だが3割残るならそれは案外。
ちょっと待て。やめろ。言っちゃダメ。
She bit her lip and looked around, probably for a way out of the situation. She clawed the wall, rolled on the floor, messed around with the sink's tap, clung to the fridge, then raised her arms up and walked like a crab. Finally, after looking dead for a moment, she cracked a grin, still sweating.
俺は無数の男を手玉に取ってきた魔性の女。
Good joke. Thus began a weird play that Tamao penned, directed, and starred in. Wanted to cheer her on, but I figured it would have ended early if I did.
この100万ドルの肉体に触れたいのなら、それ相応のことはしてもらうぜ。
She lay down on the bed and crossed her legs, making sure I couldn't see under the sheets. The pose was akin to that of a maiden that countries waged war over.
もちろん約束は守るとも。この成田真理8万大菩薩にかけて玉緒の秘密を誰にも喋らないと誓おう。となると見返りとしてその肉体をいただかねばならないな。
え？
いただきます。
I joined my hands and lightly bowed. Tamao, who'd been pretending to use a smoking pipe, seemed confused by that. While she was off guard, I pushed her down.
おいちょっと
伝説の養父の正義はどれほどのものか楽しみだ。
待て
まずはその豊満ではない美しさを担当して。
Moved my hands in front of her and tried to remove the sheet. Sudden knock on the door interrupted us.
うるさいですよ。誰かと乳くり合ってるんですか？
A neighbor heard us, apparently. It had to have been Eru, since she was the only other person from a room on the first floor. Sako, Sorako, and Tamo were on the second one. Fuck. There was 4 rooms on the second floor, and the last one belonged to Mitri. She'd been replaced by Taigi after he vanished.
告り
Tamo shook her head to emphasize that I had to hide her presence. I nodded in agreement. I had to lie. I knew Eru wouldn't dig too deep, so I figured a blatant lie was more than
うる
enough.
さかったようなら申し訳ない。ネットで男女の成功に関するビデオを鑑賞していたのだ。
最悪です。エロ動画見るならヘッドホンをしてください。
She clicked her tongue, but accepted my answer
以後
nonetheless.
心がけるとしよう。爽快な開放感が失われるのが惜しいがね。
I heard her walk away and shut the door to her room, but we still remained quiet for a while after.
さっきのは悪ふざけにしても。
冗談だと思う。なかなかに愉快だった。いや、もちろん玉緒が綺麗だと思ったのは冗談ではないよ。
お前なんか犬に食われて道端の子に混じって通りすがりのトラックにひかれて消えちま
How vulgar. I pacified her while looking back at the fun I just had.
ぜひまたやろう。
Had I said that out loud?
さて、悪ふざけはこの程度にしておこう。玉緒も落ち着くといい。
え。落ち着いてられるか、この変態。お前いつだって変態だ。最初に会った時だって俺のこと恥ずかしめやがって。おまけに人の真似して夜中にこそこそ出歩きやがって。一体何を企んでやがる。
玉緒。
Steam rose from her head as she shook in anger. Ignoring that, I looked right at her face.
なんだよ。
She backed away a
私は
bit.
玉緒の秘密を誰にも決して漏らさないと誓う。その代わり、私のことも詮索無用で願いたい。
いいぜ。お互いに深入りなしってのが筋だよな。
その引き換えとして、私は玉緒がこの学園の秘密、暗部を探るのに力を貸したいのだが、どうかね。
She made a strange
お
expression.
前の目的もスクールの秘密だってことか。
詮索は無用だと言ったろう。
Extended my hand towards her, but she simply stared at
玉
it.
緒の目的が何であれ、私の望むものがどういうものであれ、このままでは二人ともたどり着けない。君が友情を抱いていなくても構わないのだよ。これは遊戯ではなく共闘だ。私たちはほんの一時靴輪を並べて同じ方向へと進む。いつか道をたがえる時が来るわ。どうだ。
Surprised, she hesitated for a few seconds before resolutely taking my hand.
どうもよろしく。
So, a bit to accomplish their goals, the Avenger and the Hound crafted a brief duet. My socks feel so weird. The ashen night sky changed to a late purple and then a fiery red. A new dawn was rising. The hectic night had finally reached its end. Tamo snuck out of Narita's bed, dragging her wounded body away. She realized the danger of the others finding out that she'd been in Narita's room the whole night, so she tried to get back to hers as soon as possible. Speaking of the owner of this room, he'd fallen asleep on the sofa after letting Tamo have the bed.
大物だよな。この状況でのんきに寝てやがる。人の気も知らないで。俺が寝首かいたらどうすんだよ。
Is she gonna, like, notice the big ass fucking wound in his back? Seemed stranger and stranger to her by the day. The weird things he told her last night left her grasping for answers. Beautiful, cute, it was the first time someone had praised her so wholeheartedly. Where Tomo was from, beauty was merely considered another card to
お前
play.
みたいなやつ初めてだよ。
He'd also suggested they investigate the secrets of the academy together. And
私は一人の学友として君の身を案じ、君が危険に踏み込まないことを願っている。
学友
she didn't want him to say that. She could understand if it came from Saku or any of the other girls. They knew nothing, so they obviously believed her to be a fellow student. Shinri Narita, on the other hand, was a sharp weirdo. He must have understood why Tamo snooped around the academy. Despite that,
俺はなんだっけ、そうロンリーソルジャーなんだよ。
Ada had explained that expression to her. The girl had a tendency to pick up various phrases from her manga and games, and Tamo had heard her use the phrase to describe her. What was Shinri Narita's goal? There was no doubt he was hiding something. However, she felt he wasn't like her employers.
まさかマジに俺の体を狙って。いや、そんなバカな、成田が俺をそんなバカな。
She denied her own words with all her might.
意外と学友だから心配したってのが本気でいいやつだったりするのかな。
Nah, that was a bad way to look at it. He was a perv who fondled on first meeting. He was a perv who fondled on first meeting. A weird, a freak whose motives remained a mystery. She couldn't lower her guard around him. The fact that she'd discovered a secret was a major failure on her part. It was impossible to predict his actions. If it had something that drew the Academy's attention to them, that'd be the end of her. She'd gotten so close, it would all go to waste. It was probably safe to cooperate with and keep an eye on him, regardless of what his goals were.
俺のことを助けたんだよな。
Impossible. Tamo's world was normal to cut off any dead weight, yet he put himself in danger to save Tamo's life.
余計なことは考えるな。スイッチを入れろ、俺。仕事の最中に気を取られたら命取りになるぞ。よし、こんな変態のことなんてもうどうでもいい。爆睡している今のうちにさっさと出ていこうっと。
As she walked to the door, she looked back at the sofa as if she'd forgotten of something. Narita was still fast asleep, so she wondered how defenseless the proud pervert was in that state. But interested, she snuck towards the sofa. He slept with his face facing the back of the sofa, so that was the only way to get a good look at it. She closed in on him and extended her neck. The man had a weird set of skills. Drawing too close in the wrong way could have alerted him. Keeping her distance and her heart steady, she looked at him. A bit closer, just a bit closer.
俺、何やってんだか。
She returned to her senses when she spotted one of Narita's eyes at his nose. Why was she even interested in his sleeping face? She'd been acting like some schoolgirl. Well, she was, but that wasn't the real her. For whatever reason, she felt off that night. In fact, she hadn't been at her best since Narita transferred in. He drove her insane. Knowing the pain, she picked up her clothes and quickly got dressed. Then she shook off any unnecessary thoughts like a duck covered in water and escaped the room. I felt Tamo walk away, woken up when she squirmed to get out of bed, but her silence made it clear she wanted to sneak out. Didn't want to ruin it for her, so I just kept my eyes closed. Tamo stuck around for a lot longer than I expected. But after mumbling some things I couldn't quite make out, she left the room. I heard a light sigh as the door closed. I was alone yet again. Knew full well that I'd chosen a dangerous path. Joining forces to cooperate against the Academy seemed logical, but it came with the risks of her discovering my goals and identity. The best course of action was to act like nothing had happened. It was exactly what I would have done if she hadn't said those words.
そういうわけにいくかバカ。
It was a scream without a hint of falsehood in it. It gave me the urge to help her. Why though? I asked myself that question, but I failed to figure out a clear answer. I had other choices. What kept me from choosing them? Was it just being sympathetic, or had I done it because I considered her a friend? A friend, eh? Foolish. Shinri Narita was an avenger. The academy was merely a means to reach his target, a stage on which he planned to enact his revenge. If I'd warmed up to it so much that I'd formed detachments, and had also developed new weaknesses, I had to be more careful than ever before. I'd allowed Tamao to discover my true identity.
自分で選んでおきながら厄介なことだ。
The person I'd invited in had left, making my small personal space feel more quiet than ever. Come morning, I made my way to Miss Tokino's lesson in the large classroom, where I found Tamao meekly sitting at her desk with the other crowns. She usually jumped into class moments before it began, but today she arrived a whole 15 minutes early. I almost frozen over.
どうかしたの？朝から様子がおかしいわよ。心配事とか相談事とかあったら力になるよ。
別に何でもねえってば。
きっと病気です。ノーノ。
Tamao had been acting strange since our breakfast in the dorm, which drew the attention of her considerate friends. She stared at nothing, spaced out a lot, and walked so unsteadily that she crashed into walls multiple times. Last night's events must have bothered her. I'm worried that she might fail to keep our secret for long. I had to calm her down.
おはよう、玉尾。昨夜は大変ではなかったかね。
Actually, depending on what he says, it could be smart. Just say that they had, that she challenged him to another, like, contest, basically. And maybe she's still exhausted because of that. Something like that. Ancient wisdom said that all illnesses started in the mind, where you were ruined to balance of the body and freed up room for physical ailments. Thus, chiefly called out to her, hoping to dispel her gloominess. Tamao jumped up like she'd found an explosive with only a few seconds left on the timer, making the others turn to look at me. Hold on, let's see that again. Let's just see that again real quick. I think it's worth her expressions erased her face within half a second. She was trying to figure out what I meant by something.
私が起きる前にいなくなっていたので心配したが、ちゃんと投稿していたようで安心し。
She realized that none of the somethings were good, so she jumped out of her chair and closed my mouth.
やめろ!
To outsiders, it looked like we were just playfully messing around. The Cappuccino said, clearly closed, so the other girls looked at us with perplexed eyes.
一体何事？新手の HMI による攻撃？
I was not expecting a JoJo reference.
玉緒ちゃん、昨日まで成田くんとは喧嘩ばかりしてたのに、いつの間にか仲良くなれたんだ。そんなご都合主義があるわけねえと言いますか。ぶっちゃけ、デジャブ？自分、先々週ぐらいに空子から似たような目に遭わされた記憶がある気がします。冗談きついです。マジなら最悪。超最悪。
違うって、だから成田の口元に蚊
がペロ。
Tamo used quite a lot of force. I reflexively stuck out my tongue and licked her palm. Oh, how I loved the taste of a maiden's skin in the morning. That sounds very dangerous. Sounds very, serial killer. Tamo turned pale and jumped back while Saku pointed at me. That was rather rude. I honestly wanted to suggest you rethink her actions.
成田、朝から悪ふざけのしすぎは困ります。
すまない。玉緒の反応が愛らしいのでつい舌が出てしまった。
Someone fell silent. The others parted like the Red Sea.
愛らしい？いえ、これはこれで成田らしいかも。でもそんなまさか。
そうなの。まさか玉緒ちゃんも。
A complicated, uncomfortable silence. Luckily, it broke it.
うっざ、のろけ最悪。マジ最悪。
With that, the flow of time resumed. Tamo glared at me, then backed off to form her circle with the others and tell them something. Class was about to start, so I took my usual seat next to Saku. But this time, another man also sat nearby.
今のはガールズトークというやつかな。
Taigi Mikado, son of Kurufune Mikado, as well as the 7th Etoile who joined us 2 weeks ago.
一夜明ければ君と玉緒くんは随分と仲良くなっている。不思議なことだね。
昔から男女の仲とは不思議なものだというらしい。
Taigi and I spoke to each other like we'd been best friends for a decade.
落ち着いて玉緒ちゃん。教室で暴れたらまた備品壊して時の先生に怒られちゃうよ。
Tamo overheard us and started to snap, but Soroko stopped her.
男女の仲というよりも人の心と言うべきだろうね。かくも騒がしく不可思議なものは他にはない。
なるほど、確かにその通り。
騒ぎといえばちょっとした噂があるんだが、成田、君は夜更かしをする方かな。何でも昨夜学園の敷地内でトラブルが起きたらしい。遅くまで起きていたのなら何か見たり聞いたりしなかったかな。
He muttered that as though it was no big deal, but then looked at me with the cold and completely uncaring eyes I'd grown used to over the past 2 weeks. Like always, he tried to peer deep into my heart.
昨夜は日付が変わるまで起きていたが、残念ながら寮の近くでは何事もなかった。
Thus, I donned the mask of the normal me.
だろうね。その噂によると騒ぎは森でだそうだ。
では知る由もないな。
Tamo overheard us and tensed up, but I pretended not to notice. Is it just me or is Tamo just fucking terrible at her job?
大義が興味を持っているのであれば、私も耳をそば立てておくとしよう。何か手がかりが得られたなら、我が友人にすぐさま伝えるために。
ただの噂だよ。気にするほどのものじゃない。
Soon enough, Miss Tokino entered the classroom.
それでは本日の講義を始めます。
Thus, our every day continued. The shadows slid through the academy at night. Tamo, namely. The silhouette resembled an agile beast, but it was hard to spot when mixed with the stationary shadows. So it's not me, since, can't really call that agile. To be fair, I did, at least push it out a little there, so... It was Tamo Akaito, and she'd been sneaking past security.
さてと、
stopped at a spot next to the school building that no cameras reached. Remembering what happened that morning made her sigh. Ah! He was a little worried, but his promise to Narita hadn't revealed her secrets. In fact, he just used it to crack a joke, which didn't sit right with her, but she could ignore it. Her chest pounded. She put her hand on her mouth and pondered her predicament. Him finding out her secret was an even bigger problem than she'd initially thought. Narita was a weirdo, after all. She couldn't count on him to cooperate, nor did she want to. Tamao had done fine by herself thus far. She was a model lonely soldier. However, her thoughts had been going in circles since noon. If she didn't have to cooperate with him, she could have just refused. She wanted to keep him from doing anything weird, but that felt like an excuse. After all, she also had the option of silencing him for good, but then you'd have to make sure no one gets suspicious about him suddenly leaving. Why did she decide to trust the promise of a man like him? She didn't understand it. Was she just confused because he was the oddest man she'd ever met? Or that aside, there was something worth celebrating. Her true self, which had stayed hidden at all cost, remained a secret to the crowns.
こんなの教えられるわけないよな。
The real Tamao Akahito lived in a completely different world than those girls. There was something else to consider. Taigi Mikado, the new student who joined right after Midori left, was the son of Chairman Kurofune Mikado. And that meant he was no normal student. She felt like Taigi had been watching her. It seemed most like he was suspecting her of hiding something. Taigi also kept an eye on Narita, though the gaze he aimed at him felt somewhat different. Whatever the case, she didn't have much time left. The wound still pained her, but she had to dig out the academy secrets as soon as possible.
様子を見るだけのつもりだったけど。
That was why she'd ventured out in her school uniform. However, she was still willing to go the whole way. She moved her hand away from her mouth and formed a fist. She just remembered that Narita licked that hand earlier in the day. What kind of person did that anyway? But remembering the sensation of his tongue, she turned red in the face.
いやいや、頭おかしいぞ。絶対成田のやつは。
She shook her head and chased those unnecessary thoughts away. After confirming that no one was around, she ran off towards the windowless building. When Tamao dashed off, her surroundings had been completely empty. However, as soon as she left, a shadow slid off a corner near the garden, revealing a certain man. It was I! Shinri Narita. I eagerly followed her, but she put some major distance between us in a blink of an eye.
焦って無理な行動に出るのではないかと気をつけていてよかったというところだろうか。
If I hadn't done that, so no Tamao was dashing off. Maybe was she still hurt? But she wasn't in the right state of mind either. She hadn't even noticed that I was following her.
本当に無茶をするものだね。
Despite last night's event, the ominous forest surrounding the tower hadn't upped its security. Needless to say, it was because reinforcements would merely have gotten in the way. The area was already under the protection of the mystical forest and the mysterious marksman. There was a wall that turned the tower into an impregnable forest.
やれる。今夜は行ける。あのガーディアンは片付ける。こっちの姿を見たやつ、全員始末する。
She crouched in the shadows like a highly strung bow and prepared to break through the security. Suddenly,
こんばんは。
I'd expected as much, but she noticed me before I even touched her shoulder. She jumped about 4 meters away and looked at me, clearly shocked.
アリタ、またお前かよ。
そう、また私だ。やはり夏の夜の散歩は気持ちがいいものだね。
なんでわざわざ邪魔しに来やがったんだよ、てめえ。
She glared at me like I was a piece of gum stuck on to her shoe. Tamao looked charming even when mad.
冷静さを失っているのではないかね。状況をよく考えてみることだ。
うっせえ、俺のどこが冷静じゃないってんだ。頭なら十分冷えてる。これ以上面倒増やすな。
She waved me off and tried to walk away, but I grabbed her arm to stop her.
この通り、玉緒の怪我はまだ癒えていない。それに昨日の今日だ。罠の一つでも張って待ち構えているとすれば、 それこそ全てが追放に帰するだろう。狂犬の無謀と虎の強胆を履き違えて、それで満足か、赤ひと玉を。
それは
She tried to argue, but simply hung her head and bit her lip
無
instead.
謀にあえて踏み込まねばならないのが戦いであるように、流行る自分を殺して耐えるのもまた戦いではないのか。
勝ってる。
Voicing her shame, she clenched her fists so tight that I expected to bleed. After Tamao calmed down, we left the forest. However, instead of the dome, we chose to head somewhere outside the academy. Partners capable as Tamao made exiting through the route I'd used with Eru a simple matter.
どうしてわざわざ外へ出るんだ。
学園の敷地ではどこから監視されていないとも限らない。それにあそこには200人の HMI がいる。重要な相談をするのであれば、学園から離れた方が確実に安全だろう。
重要な話か。
We stood on a road some distance away from the academy. It was an open space, so if anyone approached, we'd know it. Saying nothing, he looked up at the moonlit clouds above and waited for her to speak. She mirrored my actions at first, but eventually she broke the silence.
なんだ。お前、俺の素性とか目的とか、どれぐらい見当ついてる？
そうだな。確証があるわけではないが、おおよそは分かっていると思ってもらっても結構だ。
なんだと？なぜバレた？いやいや、鎌掛けかもしれねえ。全力で白切るぞ。
Why is she fucking terrible at this? Why does it with people in these, like, mystery spy infiltration visual novels always sending the people that are worst at the job? There's fucking Rendo Natsume and Hello Goodbye as well. Which is a funny coincidence, considering both games start with hello. In 4/5 of a second, expansion shifted a number of times, providing insight to her thought process.
玉尾はどこまでも正直者だな。こんな仕事に従事させておくには惜しい人材だ。
いやいや待て、分かったって何にだ。俺を何だと思ったんだ。
いいのかね、言葉にしても。大層恥ずかしいことになるかもしれないが。
恥ずかしいって何よ。成田の言うことは全然信用できねえ。本当に分かってるなら言ってみろよ。
She delivered an intense glare at me. For whatever reason, it felt intoxicating. In fact, I've waited long enough that I have even turned into a form of pleasure. After enjoying her gaze for a moment, I presented my case.
玉尾は一種のエージェントだ。何らかの機関の一員、あるいはその命令で行動している。つまり学園と良好な関係とは言えない組織の倉庫というわけだ。目的は学園に隠されている秘密の追求、あるいは機密の入手といったところか。個人的な見解で言わせてもらえるなら前者だろ
う。根拠は？
人選だ。産業スパイの類として投入されるにしては、玉尾はいささか素直すぎる。
Her reaction to my earlier words made that rather evident. Tamao wore her emotions on her sleeve, which no real pro would have ever done. Only HMIs could enroll in the academy, which explains why they picked her.
よりによって成田に。
I could predict that she seemed
それで
embarrassed.
はおおむね当たっているのかね。
Instead of replying, she reached for my throat as if her hand was a knife. Tamao from before had disappeared. The bashful maid with an indomitable glare had vanished without a trace.
玉尾、君に人が殺せるのかね。
簡単だ。殺すもバラすも止めるも埋めるも何もかもあっという間だ。それっきりで後腐れもない。
She wasn't lying. To Tamao, killing was as simple as brushing her teeth. Where had Tamao hidden this cold, bloodstained... Where had Tamao hidden this cold, bloodstained
お
murderer?
前が邪魔なら。例えば、俺を狙ってどこからか送り込まれたやつなら、俺は迷わずそうなる。
この私が誰かの下について働いたりするように見えるのかね。
まあ、見えねえな。
moved her head about in thought and relaxed and nodded.
じゃあもう成田には隠してる意味ないな。お前相手だと嘘ついても見抜かれそうだし。
おとなしく諦めて詳しいところを話したまえ。そうでなければ私も手の貸しようがない。
偉そうなやつだな。状況分かってんのかおい。てめえ今口を塞がれるかどうかの瀬戸際だぞ。
それは恐ろしい。そういうことなら玉緒のメイドプレゼントを期待してもよいのかね。
After thinking about the situation and sighing, Tamao spoke up.
それと言っとくけど俺メイドじゃねえから。
うん。
大雑把には成田の言う通りだよ。天下がノーブルスクールには黒い裏がある。
帝黒船は持ち前の政治力を駆使してスクールの運営に政財界からの強い後押しを得ている。多少の不祥事なら問題にはならないはずだ。
Explained why the attack on Saku never made it to the news.
なのに黒船の敵対者が弾を差し向けたのは噂の中身がそれさえ吹き飛ばしかねない黒船にとってまさに命取りのアキレス腱だからか。
お前ほんと話の早いやつだよ。ま、そういうわけで俺は学生としてここにやってきたってわけ。
目的のために潜入したにしては学友たちとも親しんでいる様子だったがね。
うるせえ、馴染んでる方が怪しまれないだろうが。
玉緒の顔を立ててそういうことにしておこう。
She turned red and bit her lip. I had a hard time keeping a straight face when I saw that. Thinking it was her turn, she pointed at me.
詮索なしって約束だったけど結局こっちのことを話したぞ。俺にも成田に聞きたいことがある。おとなしく答えてもらうぜ。
好きなチャイナドレスの色は赤だ。それから日本の父兄の制服は旧制服の方が。
そんなこと聞いてねえよ。
I can respect his tastes there. China dresses are the shit. She cut my words
残
short.
念だ。個人的にこの話題なら3日3晩は話し続けられるというのに。
聞きたくもねえ。そうじゃなくて俺が聞きたいのはお前がどういうつもりかだ。お前だって目的があってこの学園に来た口なんだろ。
Tamao looked up and glared
その
at
通
me.
り。この私も玉緒と同じ穴のタイガーだ。
最初からてめえは怪しいと思ってたんだよ。
She stood and proudly puffed out her chest. She even crossed her arms in front of him. Tamao looked extremely lovable when she got so uppity, so I chose not to ruin the fun.
で、てめえの目的は？
私は玉緒の目的を当ててみせた。私の目的を知りたければ同じようにしてみるというのはどうかね。
当たったら答えるんだな。よし。じゃあこの学園の秘密を探りに来た。
外れだ。ではこの質問はこれまでということに。
お前本当だろうな。マジ外れなんだろうな。当たってるのをごまかしてんじゃねえだろうな。
もちろん嘘は言わない。
She glared at me with a hint of suspicion in her gaze, but quickly understood that line of questioning was a waste of time and moved on.
じゃあどうして俺に手を貸してくれるんだ。
どうして手を貸してくれるのかとは。
Most people would assume that I planned to use them, but the way she put it made her sound grateful. Innocent mind did not suit someone to send to infiltrate the academy at all.
私も学園の秘密には興味がある。そう考えてもらって結構だ。だがそれだけではなく。
だけでないんなら何なんだ。
このモシクを持っている相手を手助けしたいと願うのは当たり前ではないかね。
Could have lied, but Tamao was so straightforward that I wanted to be honest with her. Honestly, the strangest thoughts kept flowing into my head.
へえ、なるほど。このもし。
After she repeated that word, her brain caught up to the situation and she froze. She turned as red as a raging fire. The color even reached up to her ears.
てめえ、成田、なんで俺を、成田、なんで？
美しいものに惹かれるのは人として当然だよ。
I finally realized that I was quite serious about her. Absurd and foolish. There may have been a natural emotion for a person, but I was an inhuman avenger. Plus, the maiden who enchanted me was someone who had the potential to end up as an enemy. And yet... Oh my, that was no turning back.
玉尾の純粋でまっすぐな心はとても綺麗だ。
純粋？何が？成田何？マジ私なんでですか？
I placed my hand on my chest. My hands had lost everything. The entire clan had died. It had survived for no apparent reason. It crawled forward, using rage as fuel, stood up due to immense hatred in my heart. However, those same hands suddenly felt a certain warmth. I reminisced about the sky I'd gazed up at long ago. Oh, fuck, I took this screenshot. I need a CG anyways. How strange. So long outside to feel him. This human emotion once more.
復讐者には無用のものではないのか。一振りの剣、一個の弾丸として旧敵を殺す好みには余る。違う。
No, this human heart could not be cast aside. Revenge was a solemn prayer for the dead, something that only humans could enact. If I only clung to sweet hatred, I was no better than the traitors. A beast in the hide of men.
何言ってんのあんた？マジで？なんで？
The unexpected situation had thrown her for a loop, a rather delicious reaction. If the night wind hadn't cooled them off, my cheeks would have warmed.
玉は私が嫌いかね。
Took a step forward, closing the distance between us.
よく考えて答えてほしい。嫌っているというなら。
いや、別に嫌いではないけれども、でもほら、なんだ。
よく考えて答えてほしい。嫌っているというなら、これ以上何もしない。だが、そうでないのなら、私はきっとためらわない。
嫌いではないぞ。本当に全然嫌いじゃない。むしろ、いや嫌いじゃないぞ。でもお前は本当に何を。
玉を。
成田。
I drew closer and forced her to face me. Tamao found herself unable to look me in the eyes as she attempted to escape. She seemed so flustered that her usual physical prowess had vanished. She failed to even stand straight, so I held on to her shoulder so hard it might have actually hurt. It was night, and we were under a bright moon, a world of our own, and I did nothing but look at her. Unable to meet my gaze, she looked in random directions.
玉を、こっちを向いてほしい。
After letting out that strange, meek response, she gave in and looked back at me. Bewitching lips shook due to the tension in the air.
玉尾の気持ちをはっきりと聞かせてほしい。
気持ちって何のこと？
She reflexively tried to get away again, but it didn't let her.
私は赤人玉尾に好意を抱いている。玉尾は私に対してどういう感情を抱いているのか。
She fell silent as though some bread had gotten stuck in her throat. Waited without looking away from her for even a second. The wind whipped at a swift speed, so 3 clouds had already passed by the moon above. The 4th cloud that came was large enough to cover the whole thing, granting us a moment of merciful darkness. Emma's expression became impossible to make out, and she let out a whisper. Her silent voice seemed extremely clear to me. She just repeated herself, but her red visage and her voice, which quivered like a newborn deer's, revealed exactly how she felt. Warm joy filled my heart. It felt much like the sweetness of a piece of candy in my mouth. Taste of sin and foolishness, surely. I closed my eyes and savored the sweet, forbidden feeling, but when I reopened them, the clouds had cleared. Flushed all over and bited down on her lip. The moonlight let me see Tamao clearly. I gave in to the urge and pulled her into me. Fucking mans went for it. Our lips joined. Words were both tough and so soft you'd think they might melt. My senses were overwhelmed by Tamao and Tamao alone. The scent of her hair, which came from the expensive soap she used, mixed with the bittersweet feminine smell from her neck. I heard her lightly moan in surprise and squirm, uncertain how to react. Her cheeks felt soft and warm, and her silky hair danced in the wind. Feeling her with all my senses, I slowly backed away. She looked like she was still processing everything that had happened.
失敬した。あまりに玉緒が可愛かったものだから。
俺、初めての。
First kiss, I assumed.
そんないきなり。さっきの初めてのキス。
She hung her head and shivered. Her clenched hands turned pale as she grabbed her skirt and wrinkled it.
素晴らしかったよ、玉緒。君の行為に感謝する。
何がバカクソてめえ死ね得体なりと死ねクソバカクソ
Her curses made me worried that upset her. She hid her face, so I snuck a peek at it. Luckily, it ended up being absurdly easy to tell that she was smiling. Her joy, honestly, even felt infectious. The moonlight showering her made me want to keep gazing at her. But it was far too late in the night for that.
玉緒、そろそろ戻った方がいいだろう。サクたちに不在が知られると。
Oops. Tamao returned to her senses, looked up at the position of the moon to calculate the time, and quickly understood what I was saying. Then she returned all red and opened her mouth once more.
こんなことでごまかされたりしないからな。お前の正体絶対掴んでやるからな。
うん。やはり個人の言う通り、女心とは複雑なものだね。
Car approached us, traveling down the road in the dark. And then the headlights eventually hit our position. However, when they did, they found no trace of even a single soul. Fucking spooked. Those drivers. I returned to my room without anyone noticing. Tamao must have done the same. I had enough trust in her skills to know she'd be successful. You know what? Fuck it. No. I need to, like, hold myself back here. Just stop it here. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. See you next time. Bye-bye. Ah! Stop myself. Oh boy.